We are beginning the Lamrim Chenmo, and really precious teaching. I'm really have gotten excited about the opportunity to really provide such a substantial teaching and really see if we can unpack it in a very usable, practical Western way. There's, obviously Tibetan cultural overlay in the teachings, and we have different, not just different culture in a sense, but often not even words that match what's being said here. And so we'll see if we can't just unpack it and see if we can make it pretty usable. The Lamrim Chenmo is based upon Atisha's Lamp on the Path. So that's the root text. And then the Lamrim Chenmo being commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa. This teaching that we're be covering, I will actually draw from several sources. The Lamrim Chenmo itself, commentary by Lama Zopa Rinpoche on the Lamrim Chenmo, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Some people ask what text to get. If you were to get a text, I would suggest that one. And then some teachings from Venerable Tubden Chodron. So a lot of resources. It's nice to have Venerable Tubden Chodron. She's a Western nun and an incredible teacher. And she's able to often bridge that Tibetan Western mind quite well. Very traditional teacher, incredible example of the Dharma. And really one of really pure Vinaya. She runs a monastery up in Washington that still functions as pure Vinaya. They don't even, they run only on offerings, and even the food, they don't take offerings of money and go buy food. It's literally the offerings of food. And she's been able to really establish this and grow it. And when she comes and gives talks, they're Dharma talks, which are always offered freely, and her books are on the back, and they're offered on donation. Really wonderful example in this modern day of someone who is really an example of a Dharma teacher. So, and she has quite a bit of online resources too. So if you ever want to look into it, she's got a vast library, including a whole 2-year course on the Lamrim. So I'll be Tubden Chodron. So not Pema Chodron, Tubden Chodron, and they're both contemporaries. Tubden Chodron's Gaelic tradition, same as my tradition, and Pema was actually Shambhala. So with the Lamrim Chenmo, the idea was that Atisha, we'll go back to Lamp of the Path, took the whole essence. He studied the whole body of all the Buddhist teachings, different lineages. He really went and studied from Theravada all the way through Mahayana, through the Vajrayana, through wisdom and compassion. He got all the lineages. He did all the practices. And when he made this offering of the teaching, he took the essence of all of them and put them in a very specific order and category, steps on the path to enlightenment. It was called the Lamp of the Path. And so the essence of all these teachings and where they go was put in order in a very systematic way, and thought that would be the best use for the Tibetans at that time. Since then, there's been these incredible commentaries that have really expanded upon that, and one of the great ones is by Lama Tsongkhapa, which is what we're working with. And the beauty of this is literally everything from how to set up an altar to what to meditate on, to what, from each realization to the next one, all the way to enlightenment. It's all here. So, and if you're getting a teaching from someone in China, in a Pure Land type school, or if you're listening to a Zen teaching, or you're down in Thailand or in Tibet, whatever they're teaching, with the Lamrim, you can say, oh, that goes here. Okay, I can see where that goes. That goes here. And that's why that works. And this goes here. And you can see how it goes into this path. So it's a very organized, systematic approach, and it's taught in a way that is to be realized. So it's not that we hear a teaching and that's all fine and good, and then we go out and go have dinner and then go do our shopping and just go on with life. It is really taught in a sense that whatever's taught, we want to take through 3 levels of understanding. So they talk about the 3 wisdoms. So one's hearing a teaching. So we're here, we're going to hear a teaching. That's the first wisdom. I hear a teaching. And often that's as far as we get, right? I heard a teaching. Well, we may remember it. We might remember it for a little while. It's hard to remember it a week from now. Much harder to a year from now. And yet, it's pretty funny. In our Western culture, we'll go, there's a teaching on it. Well, I've heard that teaching before. Oh, really? Can you tell me about it? And with the Dharma, we really want to embody the teaching. We want to familiarize ourselves. We want to come to it again and again and again so it can permeate our being. So we go from hearing a teaching to taking some time to really thinking about it. They call the second level of wisdom contemplating the teaching. Really contemplating, thinking about it. Does that make sense? And he said this. Is that really? Come on. And you tear it apart. You kind of attack it. And you go and you throw stuff at it. And you go, does this hold up? And sometimes in our monastery we'll actually have debate. So we'll literally debate it and see if it holds up. And then the third level is meditation on the teaching. So the idea is that whatever we talk about during the week, I would invite you to think about it and meditate on it. Call it to mind for 5 or 10 minutes in a meditation and remember what was going on and bring it to mind and see about that. The way that we're going to change a mind stream that is just wreaking havoc in our life is not by showing up once a week on Wednesday and having a little meditation and Dharma talk, I mean, it's nice, feels good. I get some tea out of it. But if you want to liberate yourselves, if you want to remove yourself from suffering, if you want enlightenment, it's work. It is the opposite of everything our mind is telling us to do. It is literally, I used to have this mug, and the mug had all these fish going down, and this one little fish that was colored going up. And that's really the Dharma for me, is that my mind stream, my habits, my conditioning, everything is really pulling me in the opposite direction of the path to no more suffering. There's a quote I posted in our little Dharma group by Mingyur Rinpoche. It said, once we begin to practice the Dharma, we stop an abusive relationship with ourselves. And it's really quite true. There's so much that we do that just keeps us trapped and entrenched in creating cycle and cycle of anger, resentment, frustration, depression, over and over and over. And we're compulsively drawn right into it. And the worst part is it looks like it's good. It's very delusional. It looks really good. It looks really good. And we think that, yeah, this time I'll be really happy, for a little while. And so if we're going to make progress, the idea is that we want to see if there is, in fact, a way to remove suffering. How is there a path that can really eliminate my mental afflictions of anger, resentment, frustration, jealousy, depression, etc.? And from a Buddhist theory point of view, what the Buddha basically taught was, if you live in reality, it's impossible. It's impossible to have anger, resentment, frustration, jealousy, resentment. It's impossible for these mental afflictions to arise. They are dependent upon misperception. That's what gives rise to them, misperception. That's the root thing. And everything that we teach, if we want to remember, it all comes back to learning to live in reality. our true nature and the true nature of phenomenon. But our layer of delusion is thick and strong. And our habits and conditioning are like ropes, that just keep us bound. So if we're going to participate in this liberation, it's going to require that we need to put a little effort in. We need to take a little time during the week. I posted a short video someone posted earlier on the Dalai Lama's Holiness's morning routine. I don't know if some of you saw that maybe. And, he's still getting up at 3 a.m. He's still doing all his practices. He's still, he does a little exercise. He does his prostrations. He does his prayers. Every day it's got his lojong, the 8 verses and so forth. And then, he has his breakfast. And the interviewer asked him, what's the first thing you do in the morning? What's the first thing? And the first thing he does every morning is shape his motivation. That's what he said. I shape my motivation. The first thing I am really putting my motivation to making this life meaningful, cultivating bodhicitta, to liberate all sentient beings. So from the moment, that's what he's doing. He's shaping motivation. He's calling that to mind. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can bring our mind to, here's a day that'll never come again. I have a rare and precious human rebirth. I have this incredible opportunity right now that I've worked endless lifetimes to have. And I'm not going to have it again. What's the best use of my life? Starting our day like that, we got a shot. We got a shot at swimming against those other fishies. Right? And so, if we really understand that it's going to be a long haul, that it's God's challenges, it's not something to dabble in, per se. Laura went to a teaching by Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi, who's just an incredible Lama. And he's here in the area frequently. He was up nearby, and so we made some contact to see if we can get him here. So hopefully his next time around he'll spend some time with us. Incredible Lama. 6 languages, I believe he speaks. He's like 30s and has studied under the great masters of all the lineages, and really a direct student with His Holiness, Incredible Lama. Anyway, one of the things that she wrote down that he took was, said one of the most dangerous things is to, I think she used the word, make Buddhism a hobby. A hobby. Dabble here and there. It's kind of nice, sort of interesting. I like that little piece. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's good. Well, that other stuff, I know about that. Not going to go there. Yeah, this is good. I like that. Feels good. And the point that she said he made was that when we do that, we think we're making progress when we're not. And we get these little moments. And I think a good analogy is we rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. We get some nice recliners. Looks good. But when this physical form ends, where are we? So unless we're taking this time and this opportunity to really use it well, to cultivate 2 things, and that's our focus, 2 things, right? Merit and wisdom. I'm here to accumulate virtue, merit, good karma, and wisdom so I can start seeing clearly. The more I can create good conditions, good karmic imprints, the more I'm able to really succeed at seeing things more as they are than through a deluded mind. And the analogy we've used in the past is cleaning the windshield. So, remembering that, and when we think we're practicing Dharma, are we practicing Dharma? And that piece is important. If we're saying prayers, are we practicing Dharma? If we're reading our book, are we practicing Dharma? If I've got my mala and I'm doing that, am I practicing Dharma? And It could be or it could not be. Helping your neighbor could be practicing Dharma. What's focused is my intention, my motivation, and understanding. Am I here to help another sentient being? And seeing, making good use of my life. Am I just saying mantras to feel better? Or am I doing it so I look cool? Get a nice cool mala you get to wear. It's nice jewelry. Am I, really motivated to make the best use of this life to help others? Do I want to really attack my mental afflictions? And ultimately, anything that we do that helps remove suffering, we're practicing Dharma, really eliminate our mental afflictions. That's Dharma. So merit and wisdom, that's what we want to focus on. So I'm giving you this nice context because if we understand the context and the path, then we're going to be able to really unpack this whole stages of the path to enlightenment and understand that there's a foundation to it. And with the foundation being solid, we can really flourish. So it's worth taking some time. So when Tibetans bring in the teaching, they don't just sit down and here's let's crack open a book. It takes some time. So far, we've already covered, number one, we looked at the compilers. We looked at Atisha. We looked at Lama Tsongkhapa. We said, these are quality teachers, and here's what they went through to get these teachings, and here's all their preeminent qualities. And then we looked at the teaching itself, the benefits of this particular teaching, and how it can take you to enlightenment. And so what they're having you say is, well, before we do something, let's see if it's worth doing. And, don't just do it because somebody's sitting on a throne and they look very official. That next step is looking at what are the qualities of a teacher. If I'm going to sit here and if I'm going to put some effort into a path, well, I'd like to know that I'm listening to someone who's showing me the path, right? And someone who has and embodies certain qualities. So we listed those qualities. And then we got to, listium's not enough. We got to start seeing, well, do our teachers embody them? Do they say one thing and do another? Do they treat people the way, like everybody the same? And do they embody that which they are teaching ultimately? Do they have pacified mental afflictions? Or do you see them get pretty pissed off? Or jealous or angry or resentful? Because we're trying to get rid of pissed off, angry, jealous. I'm just saying. And so we want to kind of start paying attention to those things. Kick the tires, look under the hood, And then what are my qualities as a student, Am I here to really take good advantage of this? And do I have an open but clear mind? And am I willing to put into practice what's going on here? And am I going to be a proper vessel, the pot that we've covered? So we've covered all that, and so we really lay the groundwork to now the path to enlightenment. And as we enter that path, we talked about really creating the ideal conditions to really progress in our meditation sessions and creating that environment. So we went through the 6 preparatory practices, and that was last week, right? Okay, good. I was here. And so now they're talking, we're on the next piece, which is I think an important piece, and I think it's one that sometimes people sidestep, and I was tempted to be honest, and create some confusion and problems. And so sometimes it's taught maybe at the end, but it's really at the start in any Tibetan formal teaching, and it's really relying on a spiritual teacher. And how do you do that? And what's that look like? And if you're going to do that, why would you do that? again, everything here, there's got to be a why. It's got to be worthwhile. It's got to hold up. It's got to be beneficial. And so, relying on the spiritual teacher, the categories that we have is, what are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? How can what are the proper thoughts that I should have towards a teacher and cultivate that relationship? And how can I support that relationship with my actions? And so I just want to chime in first when we talk about difficulty. So the traditional teaching of this, ultimately, you would like to see your spiritual teacher, the one that you becomes your root guru, not just somebody like, right now we're just getting a teaching, but you decide on someone and you go, that's going to be a root teacher. And again, this could take 10 years, okay? It's not something you decide, boom, right away. It's not uncommon. You want to do research. And we're talking about that qualified teacher. And ultimately, with this teaching, with this Vajrayana essence, this infusion of Vajrayana into, even though we're on Sutra here, is the idea that we ultimately want to see our teacher as a Buddha. We want to be able to see them as a Buddha. And that's very difficult. It's very difficult. They actually say that is more difficult to achieve than getting a realization of emptiness, the empty nature of reality. So it's challenging. But just because something's challenging doesn't mean we just cast it aside. It's a fundamental piece to be able to see really the positive potentials of a spiritual teacher in your life. So it's difficult, but why would we do that? Why would it be important to see that person as a Buddha? And here we just want to understand that when we talk about seeing someone as a Buddha, we can also step back from that a little bit and look at their positive qualities. Okay? Now, all of you have all Buddha nature, every one of you. And I can focus on your positive qualities, the enlightened qualities you already have. And the idea here is that we have, depending on the school of thought, either Buddha potential or Buddha nature, in the sense that we're already a Buddha, or we already have all the potential of being a Buddha, depending on which school of thought you're in. But that's already here. It's nowhere else. We all have it. You have it. And so within a Vajrayana view, someone who's in that path, they would do practices where they see their own highest potentials, and then they tend to others and their highest potentials. See your good qualities. Now, as a teacher, you want one of the benefits of this is that you can really progress, because you feel that I now have this incredible resource of all the enlightened Buddhas right here. For me, myself, in looking at this, I had the good fortune of a really amazing Tibetan Lama who's just, I can't, there's no words really. And, but early on, just understanding that when he's speaking, he's giving the same teaching, that the Buddha gave. And so the Buddhas are speaking through him. So for me, that was easier initially. It was not that we need to think that the person's enlightened, per se, and I'll guarantee I'm not, but that all the enlightened teachings are coming through this person, and that they're being, again, if they're qualified, if they're giving proper teachings, that they're guiding you on a path. So this reliance on that really allows for, there's these 8 sort of advantages that we'll go through. But again, it comes from really looking at someone who's qualified, and we do want to emphasize that a lot of people, there's been a lot of damage done. By teachers that, are not typically all that qualified, or maybe were once qualified, and then they have those difficulties. And we hear the stories, Dharma teachers that do unethical things or are inappropriate with students, and those types of scandals. Yeah. So for me personally, as a Westerner, I always found it fascinating that when I was in monk's robes, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. When I was in monk's robes, I was invited to teach all kinds of places. Well, you're a monk, you must be. Yeah, you must be qualified, right? Universities, wherever, Dharma centers. And the fact that I'm wearing robes did not make me qualified, I'll guarantee you that. And I'm actually much more knowledgeable now than then. I was just hanging on by threads. So, still hanging on by, they're thicker threads now. And then if someone is of Asian, descent, well, they know a lot more, Give them some, give them a throne, it really looks good. And so, and there's been a lot of damage around that. There's been a lot of damage around, following people based on this pomp and circumstance and things that we get wrapped up in. So even the biggest of names, you want to check things out. You really want it to be qualified, and also you want to. And I think we'll get into that a little bit, but I also do want to point out that if you see a teacher that is doing things that are or you've heard about, and that's where I'll go with. You've heard about some things that are kind of controversial. I mean, there's some teachers out there. What I've seen here in the West, and I've sat with people who said, yeah, well, I've heard about this, and I've heard about that, and they've done this, and wow, they did that. But boy, their Dharma is really good, and, so I'm going to go there. I'm going to listen to those teachings, and which is interesting. Could be true. Could be true. They could be giving great teachings, even though their behavior is not appropriate. And, it's an interesting poise, because when I talk to these people, I said, well, why would you put yourself there when there's so many that are not controversial? There's so many incredible beings on this planet that are pure, that are ethical, that are, qualified, that are wonderful, and they're humble, and, they don't have all that swirl around them. If there's other choices, why not? And most people said they just didn't know. They just assumed all these lamas were like that, crazy wisdom, they just call it or whatever. And you're thinking, I don't know. So I invite you to, when you do receive teachings, to look at the qualities of a teacher, and also look at their temperaments and so forth, because some teachers you're going to resonate with more than others, right? Some might be really qualified, but they don't really have there's not a good karmic bond, and some of them are really, seems a good karmic bond, but maybe not that right teacher for me. But no rush, find those. My teacher was really loving, really kind, sweet, extremely patient, and there's other teachers that are pretty wrathful, and they all have their place, and some people need that sturdy hand, and some of them need a little more gentle one. So there's a wide variety. Take your time, but make sure they know what they're talking about, and they embody what they're talking about. Okay, so having said that, we want to talk about these advantages. And again here, these are things that we want to think about when we think about why would I do something? Do we just do it? I mean, how many times do we just do something and so-and-so says this is, valuable, or this is not valuable? Or even in our own day, when I taught in high school, I would have the kids when they came in take a few minutes and I would ask them, why are you here? Why are you here? And pause, because they would forget. They would forget that I'm here because I want an education, that I want to have some opportunities in my life. They would forget that they're here because they don't want to be a statistic. They would, because you're just on autopilot. You come into class, you sit down, there's the teaching. I'm goofing around with so-and-so, maybe shooting a spit wad. And, and then, man, I hope we don't have to do work today, right? And that's pretty normal. But if you pause for a moment and go, why are you here? And they think about it and they remember why they're here. That they want an education. Wow. That they would really like to have some opportunity in their life. And they did. They did. Then it changes things. So that's why it's important to reflect as we enter the foundations of this about these certain qualities. And why would it be important to have a spiritual teacher? Why? What are the qualities of relying on someone? Or am I better off just, picking up some books? There's lots of books, lots of books. And there's some that will tell me exactly what I want to hear. I like those books. And is that beneficial? What they call it, the spiritual supermarket. Right? I like that, man. I resonate with that. I resonate with this. And yet, some of the teachings we need the most are the ones that do not resonate with us. It's the ones we actually have to take a hard look at and have some accountability. And the funny thing about it is, I find this really amusing, by the way, is, Buddhist paths are, and not just Buddhist paths, if you really want to make a path into finding some inner peace, well-being in your life, the foundation of it's accountability and responsibility, right? It's ethics. Ethics, accountability, responsibility. That's how we make progress. Now, if I were to go give a talk, and I often give public talks, if I were to title it Ethics, Accountability, and Responsibility, 2 or 3 people, and they'll probably be my relatives, right? Showing that support. But you could call that same talk Cultivating Genuine Happiness. Room's full. And then, how you cultivate genuine happiness? Ethics, self-accountability, integrity, living a life you feel good about that's meaningful to you and others. Yeah. So I do have the marketing sense to not label it ethics and accountability. So that's what I'm talking about, is that, where we really get to make change in our life, it takes some work. It takes some of this stuff. But the result is really quite nice. The result, the equation, not equation, the analogy, let's use an analogy instead, is teaching delayed gratification, right? Delayed gratification. If I, want to be healthy and I exercise, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to feel pretty good about it. But if I keep eating my jelly donuts and, watching Oprah and thinking about exercising, I'm not going to get that healthy. I actually have to do it, and it's going to take some effort, but then I get the result. And there's a delayed gratification because you're not going to get it right away. And if I go, some of us may have gone on healthier diets, and you've done it for a while, and you feel better. And it's a delayed gratification. Likewise, if you want to remove anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration in your life, it's a delayed gratification. It comes from really creating the cause for it. Now, one basic rule of karma is, if there's no cause, there's no result. If there's no cause, there's no result. I want inner peace, well-being, and tranquility, but I really don't want to do the cause for that. I'd much rather sit in a jacuzzi and order in. Right? I mean, I would, really. But I won't get this result. I won't get this result. And if I just keep picking the pieces that I like, guess what? I'm not going to really take a hard look at the things that are challenging about me. And what do I need to let go of? So when we think about advantages of relying on a teacher, you're going to get someone, if they're qualified, to really unpack a path to no more suffering. And you're not going to be lost flailing around. Should I read this book? Should I read that book? Is this thing good? And we're going to be able to make progress. And there's these 8 specific ones. So number 1 is that we become closer to enlightenment. And that just makes sense, that I can actually be on a path to enlightenment instead of going in a circle. I can actually be making progress. Instead of digging 100 holes a foot deep, I can dig 1 hole 100 foot deep. I can sink in and I can go somewhere. I can become closer to enlightenment. Because, I'm not going to be just misdirected all the time, or lost, or not unsure, or uncertain. There's somebody I could actually talk to and say, well, what about this? Now, number 2, it's an interesting phrase. It says, we please all the Buddhas. And it's a cultural thing here. The Buddhas love you no matter what. So, they're not waiting up there for us to make them offerings and be pleased. It's not like that. It's more that we create access to them, relationships with them, that we're through a teacher who is giving teachings that lead to enlightenment. The Buddhas cannot enlighten us. If they could, that's a kind of a basic. If the Buddhists could enlighten us, we'd be enlightened. They love us. They don't want suffering. They've devoted lifetimes to removing suffering, but they can't do it. They can only show you the path. They can only provide the path. And they can manifest in certain ways to be present in a way to give you a particular teaching in a particular way at a particular time that will shift you. They actually say that there are Buddhas that have emanated lifetimes as a human being to live a whole life, to just bump into that person at that specific time. So they heard and they got what they needed to hear. And that whole lifetime was for them. And they also say that because of our karma, if we're sitting with a Buddha, we wouldn't know it. There's great stories about that. But as we clear our karma, as we cultivate merit and wisdom, we have access. So in this sense, when we're really developing relationships and access to these enlightened beings, it's through relying on a teacher. The teacher is giving you all of those tools to cultivate the merit, the wisdom, to have access to their help. And that's a really good perk. Really good perk. Number 3, harmful forces and misleading friends cannot affect us. Harmful forces and misleading friends cannot affect us. And so they're saying that if you have a spiritual teacher you can rely on, and they're giving you the path to enlightenment, things to do, things to alleviate mental afflictions and suffering, and you're doing the practice and of value, you're not going to be as drawn by misleading friends. By misleading friends, they're not talking about they're talking about a lot of times friends that are good friends that just don't really understand what you're doing. Like, really? You want to go sit and meditate? Really? We can go bowling, man. And, because those friends are there for you. Let's go to a bar. We can work out, do our 12-ounce curls, whatever. We'll exercise. It'll be great. And so these types of activities and friendships and things don't really draw us in as much. They actually start losing their luster. They really do. It's like, wow. Going and doing that all night and feeling like that it's not getting me to enlightenment. It's not the best use of my time. And so those things really lose their luster. And the practice of the Dharma becomes so much more fulfilling, and being around people who are on a path becomes so much more fulfilling. And creating those conditions. So our mental afflictions and faulty behavior decrease. And so I'm going to go with sort of the wisdom piece on this. Our mental afflictions and faulty behavior. So you will notice as you have a teacher that you can depend on, again, this is all benefits of relying on a teacher, is that they're going to be able to guide you to work with your mind when you're in anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, resentment. They're going to help you look at your attachments and so forth. And they're going to be able to have you learn how to watch them come and go and not attach to them. And ultimately, again, as you cultivate wisdom, the more you live a life that is in alignment with actual reality, with the way things are, and if we live in that way, the mental afflictions are just going to be so much more subdued. You get a taste of what that's like. I mean, philosophically, we can talk about, and all those of you that have done the mindfulness course with us, you know, that we don't live in a real world, right? We actually think I shouldn't get sick. You know, we think I shouldn't get cancer. We think that, you know, my luggage shouldn't get lost. And all this stuff. I mean, we live in this world that has no basis in reality. And that my relationship should last. And, you know, the world's messy. And people get cancer. And there's hospitals. I mean, just the idea that my car should start every day. Good luck. If I live in the real world, I know that life's messy. Cars don't start sometimes. I mean, just the basic, not even the emptiness, not even the ultimate nature of reality, just regular human stuff. If I live in the way things are, then you're just not going to be so shocked. Our problem is we're so ill-equipped to deal with reality. You know, every day we see people lose things, get robbed, cars break down, people get cancer, relationships come and go, and these types of things. But for some reason, not me. It's a funny world. It's a funny world we live in. And even if those things don't happen, we're still going to get sick, you know, and we're still going to have these issues and stuff pop up. Life's messy. So we're going to gain meditative experiences and stable realizations. And our meditation experiences, our realizations, this comes from really taking some time to meditate on these teachings. So if we have a teacher that's giving us the next thing to meditate on, we're working with them. You know, I'm having this issue. They can give you some very specific things to work on, and they can help you adjust in your meditation, which meditations to do and when to do them. And those be more stable. They'll be able to be more fruition. And the more ethical I am, the more merit I have, the foundation of my spiritual practice, meditation will get better. We won't lack for spiritual teachers in future lives. And this is, I think, a real big perk. And we, you know, think about how hard it is to get a spiritual teaching. I mean, just think in this valley in our time, right? I mean, it's great. We now have this little center. But before the center, there's, you know, another little group and another group. And how many years in this valley? And there's Aspen, and there's Glenwood Springs, and there's all the way down to Rifle. And where's the access to a spiritual teacher? You know, go over to Paonia? No. Western Slope. Expand that out. It's not easy to have direct access to a spiritual teacher, is it? It's really not. Tenzin Palmo, she traveled from England to India, found her guru, you know. And 20 years ago, you'd have to really try to find some text that was in English and try to find someone who could talk. And now we have more access, but it's still challenging. Even if you get a teacher, then, well, which lineage, which teaching, which, you know, it's a big business, Dharma, in terms of what to sift through to even find what makes sense to you. So to have access to finding and creating the conditions to have teaching in a center and a place to be connected, really challenging, really difficult. And you have it now. You created all those conditions, whether it's here or whether it's access to these wonderful lamas, that we can now listen to Dalai Lama online. I mean, we can just pull up a video and the Dalai Lama is going to break down Nagarjuna's text on the nature of emptiness. Good luck understanding it. We'll have this enlightened master just, really doing that. That was my first teaching by him. I was so far over my head. I was like hanging on by a thread to stay awake. But we have all this access, and there's some really that we can actually find them online. So if we really develop good relationships now, they really plant the seeds for continued. So continue throughout our spiritual progress. This body ends. Now we're in a new location with good qualified teachers, and that happens. It says here, number 7, we won't take lower rebirth. So if we really use this path wisely, have a good teacher, well, of course, they're going to guide you in an ethical, meaningful way to have best use of this life, so you won't have rebirth in the lower realms. Remembering the number 1 cause for life, at least human, in the next lifetime is ethics. Ethics. It's a good thing to remember. It's a really good thing to remember. One of my teachers says, if you've spent your whole life dedicated to living as ethically as possible, you have not wasted this life. You have not wasted this life. It's really important. Foundation of all spiritual growth. And then number 8, and the last one is, and it's really a culmination of the previous 7. All of our temporary and ultimate goals will be realized. So if you have a teacher you can rely on, you're going to get the best use of this life. You're going to already get to release a lot of tension, worry, and anxiety and mental afflictions now. And ultimately have the path to enlightenment. So these are the advantages. Then they always have you reflect, well, what's the disadvantages? As if this sales pitch is not enough. And really, due to time, I'm not going to go through exactly. They're pretty much the opposite in many of them, Instead of really cultivating that relationship with the Buddhas, we really start to lose that relationship with the Buddhas.
So is the disadvantages of not having a teacher?
Yeah, what they talk about is disadvantages of improperly relying or abandoning a teacher. Okay, that's thank you for clarifying. I got in a hurry because I looked at my watch. Calm. And that's, within, again, there's and this is when you've really relied on, this is your guru, this kind of, that teacher, that if we really harm that relationship, there's some difficulties around that. And so remembering that. So sometimes we've received teachings from a teacher, and they helped us, and they were good. And then later, I don't like that teacher much anymore. Or maybe I start noticing some things, And then I start bad-mouthing them to others, that kind of stuff. Where, I used to go to that Dharma center, and, now, I start talking bad about that person. That kind of thing. You can do some real damage karmically. And the idea here, rather than going through this big list, is, obviously we're not going to have the opportunities to really access the Dharma in the way that we did, but we actually do some damage. And this is not to say that we don't hold teachers accountable. It's to say that we recall that teacher helped us at one time, and now maybe they're not the one for us. And we distance, but we don't need to tell everybody exactly why they're not the one for us.
What about telling the teacher that they're not the one for us?
Yeah, now that, if you've taken someone and they've been your teacher, then it's good to have a conversation. with them. And, that's actually kind of here at the end. It says, what to do if the teacher does something that seems unethical. It's kind of at the end here. But let's address that. So if we notice that there in my mind stream, some things I've noticed don't seem very appropriate to me, and this has been my teacher, then it's appropriate to talk to them and to just mention again respectfully with honor that I'm having some conflicts around this, and see if they could clear it up, because sometimes it's a misperception on my part, and so in that case that could be cleared up. Sometimes it might become real clear that that's not the person. When I was one of the teachers that I had in my own life that I didn't have a direct relationship with, but I read their text, and there was a particular video teaching that they did that actually was the reason I became a Buddhist. I took refuge vows. Helped me immeasurably. It put me on this path. Today, there's no way I would be anywhere near this person. But that doesn't diminish at all the fact that they got me on the path, and that teaching got me to that next stage. And when I do my refuge tree, that teacher's right there in my honoring what they've done for me to show me the Dharma. But I just would rather not go to those courses today. But it doesn't diminish what they did for me. And I don't need to, go badmouth them or anything. But if there's something that's confusing, talk to them. Absolutely. But, once we've, when we think about that, it's not a bad rule of thumb for any human being we come in contact with. We remember how much they helped us, and not just focus on the one thing they did wrong, because that happens way too much. My best friend ever, and they do the one thing, right? What about the 100 other things they did? Yeah. We're not the one thing we did, and neither is anybody else. So it's good to remember that whole picture. So the disadvantages, if we really are inappropriate in that relationship and so forth, then is that we can really damage our practice. This has happened, I think, a lot of times. People get disillusioned, and they don't know how to work with that. I myself have been really close, extremely disillusioned, and the grim realities of the fall of the pedestals, and not with my root gurus, fortunately, none of them. But yeah, when you see how things can work and that life's messy and people are human, and whether you call it a Dharma center or a Buddhist thing or whatever, it can be really challenging. So if we don't handle it well, it can really break us from our path again. It just puts up a barrier where I can't see the good in what I did accomplish and continue on the path. The other topics we were trying to get through still with this was how to rely on our teachers with our thoughts. And I'll just quickly go through. As I mentioned at the start, ultimately, it's if we have a teacher we can rely on, we can really develop confidence in what they're saying. It's going to help us. It's going to get us to the path. It's going to get to enlightenment. And that we can ultimately develop and start seeing that teacher as really an emissary of the Buddhas, of the enlightening path. So you start really looking at their good qualities. Start attending to their better qualities. And it's nice to kind of, when you see teachers, one of the things is to think that, they have these qualities that if I'm not quite at their Buddha or that they have these potentials, you're going to listen to them a little better than if it's Joe Schmo just giving a talk. Here's so-and-so giving a talk, whose turn is it this week? you know. But if you sit there and really cultivate and rely on a teacher and your thoughts, this is someone who's really delivering the path to enlightenment. This is the Buddha speaking through this being right now. That's the proper attitude to have at a Dharma teaching. That all the Buddhas are present, and the enlightened qualities are here, and this teacher is embodying all that right now. You know, so we really want to have a mind stream that can go there. Yeah, our teachers are the media for conveying the Buddha's enlightening influence to us. And it's really rare and precious to have. So to really have that thought of honoring them. And how do we honor them? With our thoughts and respect, but also with the other piece here was through our actions, and that's where they're talking about, you want to be able to offer service or, donations, things like that any way that you can help them in any way. And you want to make sure that when you develop that relationship, that their needs are met. And culturally, sometimes this gets really awkward because, sometimes people will build huge gold statues. Every Dharma center in the West has got like a room for the Dalai Lama, and it's ornate and it's well taken care of. And there's a lot of money and resources there. And it's, it's a traditional thing. And His Holiness, he'd much rather you spend the money on whatever's needed and that the monks are fed and, things are done. So really what's wisely and good resources for that and making sure that those are done. And then just the final wrap here before we do our close. I wanted to see if anyone had questions. What to do if the teacher does something unethical, and that is, again, as you brought up, have a talk first. Check in with yourself and see if it's something I'm projecting, see if it's real. And if it is something that is not tenable, put some distance. It's okay to put some distance between you and that teacher. They do say that before you speak out against someone, that has to be really a powerful thing, really powerful thing. So we have to understand that being real thoughtful and picking whom you're getting teachings from is always the most important thing. It's nice to do that at the beginning before you enter into that relationship. Which, by the way, is different than what we're doing here. Here I'm giving the teaching, you're here at a Dharma, you're giving a teacher. This other type of relationship is this, really cultivating that relationship of that spiritual sort of root guru type thing. But even here, right, you want to make sure that the teacher's ethical, you want to make sure the teacher's has the qualities that you'd like to cultivate, that if I tell you something, here's how you should go do your life, and you see me out at the bars hanging out, womanizing, you might want to think there's something wrong here. And so all of that needs to be, I'm not going to waste my time sitting around listening to somebody who is not embodying what they're talking about, period. I'm just, this precious life is way too short. There's a lot of people, that are teaching a lot of things they can't do, and people paying big money for that. So it's an interesting thing. So that's important too. And then, don't ever, because, people have improper relationships. They get abused by spiritual teachers. We've read about that. That kind of stuff happens. Not okay. Not okay. So just because someone's, got a title or a bunch of people following them, their behavior needs to be appropriate. And if you ever feel uncomfortable, don't go there. Don't go there. Have good relationships. And don't forfeit our use of common sense. Don't forfeit our use of common sense. All right. So, what's that?
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah. So, but when you do find, like in my case, root gurus, 3 of them, I fully see them as enlightened. And I was there at the passing of, one of them. And all the signs were there, so I drank his Kool-Aid. It was proper Kool-Aid, properly conditioned Kool-Aid. It was more salt and butter tea, though, Tibetan tea. Yeah. So, and those beans are worth looking for. They're worth scouring for. They're worth making that effort. So in the meantime, we can at least provide the conditions so you can find that bean here by continuing on a path and giving solid instruction. Any questions or thoughts? Anything that came up to that?
What's the difference between contemplating something and meditating on something?
Yeah, so contemplating, is giving it some thought. Sometimes, I like to think of contemplation as bringing it to mind again and again, not necessarily in a meditative state, and even discussing it with others. And when we meditate, there's two ways of meditating, and one is very similar. It's so similar that at my monastery, they would tell you that debate is a kind of meditation. I would debate that with them, but they would win. And because they say they're single-pointedly focused and so engaged in that debate process, and you get these realizations from it. So it's really a fine line there in that sense. But often, so as we'll be instructed here, when we meditate, sometimes we'll take an idea and we'll analytically, in meditation, formally, sitting, quiet, conditioned, single-pointedly, bring in that teaching, okay? And then analytically try to attack it, which is kind of like debate in meditation. And there's another type, and one I like to do, is to just bring that teaching, sometimes a verse, again and again, and sit with it, and sit with it, and sit with it, and see how the layers come, where you're just more resting in that verse, resting in that teaching, see what comes, and do that in meditation. So contemplation is more, you can go and write about it, think about it, journal about it, just unpack it more. And then the more formal is where I'm seated, I'm single-pointedly sitting in meditation. I can do the analytical or the more contemplative piece to that.
So to tag on to that, so because what I've been hearing from you is that when thoughts come, you discount them and go back to your breath, but that sounds different.
Very different. Yeah, good point. What we do at the start is a shamatha meditation. Shamatha meditation is to develop concentration. And so a shamatha practice, you focus on one thing at the exclusion of all else. You learn to train the mind to go where you'd like. So it's not about analytical. So there's two basic forks in meditation. One is concentration and one's analytical. So when we're doing the first meditation, we're doing a concentration, we're training the mind so that it can be serviceable to do the other types of meditation. And so when we're doing our shamatha practice, it's just the one thing. And we use breath, but it could be something else, could be an image. But you just focus on one thing to exclusion of all else so that you can train the mind to more single-pointedly go where we'd like it. And then with that mind, you can do an analytical one much better. Okay, two types. Two families. There's lots of types, but two families of meditation. Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and do a little dedication. And there was a comment I think I was going to make before we do that.
Are you going to be down in Durango?
I will be in Durango. Yeah, next week.
I told my daughter to come see you.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. So next week, I'll be in Telluride at the library there, where all of the Wednesday night teachings actually began. This was requested a couple of years ago, and the first Wednesday night Dharma talk was at Telluride Library and Broadcast. And so I'll be there next Wednesday, so it'll be here on a big screen, and then I go to Durango. So that was exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. She's not a plant. So thank you. So next Wednesday I'll be in Telluride. So look forward to all of you in Telluride to return to where I began. And then, but the same teaching, we're going to continue, and now we're going to the 18 factors of a precious human rebirth. So, really fine-tuned. So you can see the progression here is, let's look at, is this valuable to do? Let's check it out. And then let's create real conditions to succeed at it and take some time to think about it. Okay. So, again, what I'm going to invite you to think about during the week is really what a rare opportunity we have and how important it is to you, and invite you to see if you can make some efforts, Sometimes the stuff that's right in front of us, we don't take full advantage of, When I used to go Monday nights, I'd sit with an old Tibetan Lama, one of the great masters. I had no idea. Like, it was Monday night, I'd go do a Chenry Sig practice. He's there with like 12, 15 people. What? And I'm thinking, should I go do that tonight? Should I go out to a movie, And I just didn't know, until I knew. And then, I would travel anywhere to be with them, And so, just remembering those types of things. We have all of our activities, we, these Wednesday nights are precious. The conditions have been created. It's created by you. And so let's see if we can keep these conditions there and see if we can have good, solid teachings that are beneficial and practical. Wouldn't it be nice to be enlightened? And that's the other thing, is that you have the qualities to be enlightened. One of the biggest obstacles for us to be enlightened is the belief that we can't be. And you can be. All your qualities are already there. But we need to bring our mind to them. Bring it up. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do a dedication, dedicating all the merit and wisdom we accumulated here today for the benefit of all beings, and do a special request to also include Elizabeth in the dedication tonight. And also invite you, if you have any friends or people who are suffering, to call them to mind as we do a little dedication of the merit and wisdom accumulated here today throughout our lives. Let us dedicate both the virtue and wisdom we have accumulated here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. Take a moment to call to mind anyone else that may be suffering. We also dedicate this virtue and wisdom to purify our own minds, so we can cultivate the pure path to enlightenment, become free of suffering, so we can truly eliminate the suffering of all living beings. All right. Thank you all so much. Joy to see you again. And again, Juanita, coming up, please register if you're interested. And Connection, the video, there's some flyers on the back. And all of you online, thank you so much for joining us. Be well, be happy, and try to stay out of trouble. Okay? That's always good advice.